principles were applied, every post-World War II president would be indictable.
It's probably true.
Can we run down them real fast? What did Eisenhower do that you would indict him for?
Eisenhower overthrew the conservative nationalist government of Iran with a military coup. He overthrew the first and last democratic government in Guatemala by military coup and invasion, leading to years of, in Iran it led to 25 years of brutal dictatorship, finally overthrown in '79. In Guatemala it led to massive atrocities, which are still continuing. That's after almost 50 years. In Indonesia, this wasn't known until recently, but he conducted the major clandestine terror operation of the post-war period up until Cuba and Nicaragua in an effort to break up Indonesia, strip off the outer islands where most of the resources are, and undermine what was then considered as a threat of Indonesian democracy. Indonesia was too free and open. It was allowing a political party of the poor to participate, and they were gaining a lot of ground, so that Eisenhower supported and helped instigate a military rebellion in the outer islands. This is just for starters. These are all indictable offenses.
What about Kennedy?
Kennedy was one of the worst. Kennedy, first of all, invaded South Vietnam. During the Eisenhower administration, they had blocked a political settlement in 1954 and instituted a kind of a Latin American style terror state, which had killed maybe 60 or 70,000 people by the end of the Eisenhower period, and had instigated a response, a reaction. Kennedy recognized that it couldn't be controlled internally, so he simply invaded. In 1962, about a third of the bombing missions were carried out by the U.S. Air Force in U.S. planes with South Vietnamese insignia, but U.S. pilot. He authorized napalm. He began the use of chemical weapons to destroy food crops. They began programs which drove millions of people into what amounted to concentration camps. Now, that's aggression. In the case of Cuba, it was just a massive campaign of international terrorism, which almost led to the destruction of the world, led to the missile crisis. And we can continue.
Greetings from the east to north to south, and this wicked as west. The topic: every U.S. president under law will be considered a felon. The questions: why you think these people that commit the same crime is not considered a felon? Let's get into it. I am your host. I am the one.
Okay. Let me kill this music. Okay. Here's a question for you. You got a person or institution or country that commit the same crime under law that is considered a felony. Get a dictionary and look up felony. Under the same law, it's considered a felony, but yet they're not even considered felons or never ever been indicted. Here's the thing. If you look at the ingredients, every U.S. president, every last one of them, you can go back to George Washington, and you can fast forward to Barack Obama, Bush 1, Bush 2, Clinton, and Donald Trump. But they have never, ever been indicted. It's not considered a felon. Now, this little trial they have for the president today, Donald Trump, And I hear Americans say he's a felon. I don't know, is Americans just plain naive or gullible? But simply because the fact that you don't get indicted or you was never brought up on charges, that don't make you a non-felon. I hear many people talk about Donald Trump is a felon. Well, if he is a felon, every other president is a felon too. And their crimes are terrible. I'm going to get into the next clip. I just need you to know that Americans are so naive that you can see a person, Mr. Robert Brooks, be murdered, being beat to death on video, and it's maybe 45 days later. No charges, no indictment. Do that make them less than being criminals? In American psyche, in our minds, we seem to have to wait until the so-called injustice system decide to bring you up on charges before we consider that person a felon. Let's move on to the next clip. You really got to hear some of the things these presidents has done.
Again, these are all indictable offenses.
About Johnson.
Well, Johnson expanded the war in Indochina to the point where ended up probably leaving 3 or 4 million people dead. He invaded the Dominican Republic to block what looked like a potential democratic revolution there, supported the Israeli occupation in its early stages. Again, we can go around the world. Take, say, Carter. You know,
I'll get there, but Nixon's next.
Nixon, we don't even have to talk about. We can skip that one, okay? But
Ford, then Ford.
Well, Ford was only there for a short time, but long enough to endorse the Indonesian invasion of East Timor, which became about as close to genocide as anything in the modern period. They pretended to oppose it, but secretly supported, in fact, not so secretly. The U.S., immediately after the invasion, the U.S. did join the rest of the world in formally condemning it at the Security Council. But Ambassador Moynihan was kind enough to explain to us, in his words, that his instructions were to render the United Nations utterly ineffective in any actions it might take to counter the Indonesian invasion. And he says proudly that he did this with considerable success. His next sentence says, in the next few months, it seems that about 60,000 people were killed. And then he goes off to the next topic. That's the first few months, went on to probably hundreds of thousands. Formally, the U.S. Announced a boycott of weapons, but secretly it increased the supply of weapons, including counterinsurgency equipment, so that the Indonesians could consummate the invasion. That's just a short period in office, but that's indictable. Seriously, in fact, that's a major war crime. Carter increased, as the Indonesian atrocities were increasing. They peaked in 1978. Carter's flow of weapons to Indonesia increased. When Congress imposed human rights restrictions, by then there was a human rights movement in Congress, to block the flow of advanced weaponry to Indonesia, Carter arranged through Mondale, vice president, to get Israel to send U.S. Skyhawks to Indonesia to enable Indonesia to complete what turned out to be near genocide, killing maybe a quarter of the population or something. In the Middle East, Carter just won the Nobel Prize. His great achievement was the Camp David agreements. The Camp David agreements are presented as a diplomatic triumph for the United States. In fact, they were a diplomatic catastrophe. At Camp David, the United States and Israel accepted, finally, Egypt's 1971 offer, which they had then, U.S. had rejected at the time, except that now it was worse from the U.S.-Israeli point of view because it included the Palestinians. In order to get Israel to accept Egypt's 1971 offer after a major war and atrocities and so on, Carter raised military and other aid to Israel to more than 50% of total aid worldwide. Israel used it at once in exactly the way they said they were going to do, as every sane person knew, as an opportunity to attack their northern neighbor, first in 1978, then in 1982, and to increase integration of the occupied territories. And that's for starters. We can continue.
Reagan?
I don't think we have to talk about that one either. I mean, Reagan is the first president to have been condemned by the International Court of Justice for what they called the unlawful use of force, meaning international terrorism in the war against Nicaragua. Again, that's just for starters. They also, the Security Council endorsed it in 2 resolutions, both of which were vetoed by the United States.
Bush won.
You know, those crimes are considered indictable offenses. And if you was not a superpower, you will be brought up on charges. America goes around the world telling people to conserve this and conserve this because of global warming. So in other words, you cut back on this and that to save the planet. But those same rules don't apply to them. Nuclear weapons. I remember back in the 70s where, you know, the deal between America and the Russians was to cut back on nuclear weapons, but that don't apply to them. It goes on and on. Human rights violations. I heard over the years, America telling nations about their human rights violations. But if you look in America and you see the vast amount of human rights violations, especially against black people, that don't count. So why would you be surprised with war crimes that America commits and nothing is done? The reason why nothing is done is because who have the courage to confront a war-mongering giant? It's going up against a bully that it's not likely you can beat. You can't match him, at least then. Now you got the BRICS nations that's coming together. So now America have a worthy adversary. So you can get away with war crimes and every other crime that you decide to commit because of the fact that there's no nation can do anything about it. Let's go to the next clip and continue to see the war crimes committed.
If one had to succinctly summarize George H.W. Bush in a single moment, it would be in the eve of his presidency in 1988. On July 3rd of that year, the U.S. government shot down an Iranian civilian plane, killing all 290 passengers on board, including 66 children. The United States adamantly refused to apologize for this horrific atrocity. Bush was then vice president under Ronald Reagan and was in the middle of his own campaign for president. At a GOP event just a month later, in August, Bush indirectly responded to the U.S. massacre of Iranian civilians with the following infamous words.
I'll never apologize for the United States of America. Ever. I don't care what the facts are. I'll never apologize for the United States of America. Ever. I don't care what the facts are.
Bush won.
Well, we can begin with the invasion of Panama. The invasion of Panama, which according to the Panamanians, killed about 3,000 people, since it's never investigated. We don't know if that's true or not. This was done in order to kidnap a disobedient thug who had been supported by the United States right through his worst atrocities. Noriega. He was brought to Florida and tried for crimes that he committed mostly on the CIA payroll. Okay, that's aggression. We could go into the details of the war in Iraq, but there were plainly opportunities for, they might not have worked, we don't know, but there were opportunities for diplomatic settlement, which the Bush administration refused to consider, and incidentally the press would not report, with a single exception, and Long Island Newsday, which did report the whole story throughout accurately, and is the only newspaper in the country to have done so. The Bush administration then did attack, and the attack was carried out in a manner which is criminal under the laws of war. They attacked infrastructure. I mean, if you attack New York City and you destroy the electrical system, the power system, the sewage systems, and so on, that amounts to biological warfare, and that's the nature of the attack. Then came a sanctions regime, which it's mostly Clinton, but began with Bush, which is, by conservative estimates, killed hundreds of thousands of people while strengthening Saddam Hussein. That takes us off to Clinton, which that's the beginning, but that's by no means the end. We can run through it. Well, we can run through that one case suffices.
All right.
But there are plenty of others.
Bush too?
Let's go on with Clinton.
Okay.
And one of Clinton's minor escapades, very minor, was sending a couple of cruise missiles to the Sudan to destroy what they knew to be a pharmaceutical plant. There was no intelligence failure. According to the only estimates we have from the German ambassador and the regional director of Near East Foundation, who does field work in Sudan, both of them estimate several tens of thousands of deaths from one cruise missile attack. It's pretty serious. If somebody did that to us, we'd regard it as bad news.
Record in the Middle East. Do you think Obama's no better?
In many ways, it's worse.
Why?
I've been writing about it. I started writing about it before the election.
Why is he worse?
Well, should we go through the details? Please. In the case of Afghanistan, he's sharply escalated the war. This is threatening a breakup of Pakistan, which could be a catastrophe for the West. In fact, there's quite an important article that just came out by Anatol Yevin, who knows Pakistan very well, whose his conclusion is that British and American soldiers are dying in Afghanistan to make life more dangerous for Britain and the United States, namely because of the impact on potential breakup of Pakistan, which has both a huge number of nuclear weapons and a radical Islamic development, both of them supported by the West, both, and continue to be. Obama is continuing to carry out actions which are threatening this. Let's go to, I've already talked about his attitude toward Egypt, the usual one. Follow the usual game plan, which I mentioned. Let's take Israel-Palestine. I mean, his position is shocking. He's refused to do, I mean, there was just a UN Security Council resolution a few weeks ago in which calling on an ending of settlement expansion, and declaring the settlements illegal, which is not even controversial. Obama vetoed it.
Okay, that was the final video. But my point was, what we look at as a crime or a person that's a felon, we look at it so different because these presidents has committed just horrible, horrific crimes. And they killed in the hundreds, in the thousands, and in the millions. And we don't see that as a crime. When you give the word to drop a bomb on a pharmaceutical company in Sudan, knowing that's not a target but you do it anyway. That is a serious crime. When you start taking lives of people and you think it's okay, and we don't see that as a crime. Because when the government tells soldiers to go wipe these people out, the soldiers have no idea. They're just following orders. But the orders that they give is illegal. Because you got America, this big superpower that nobody can match. And it want to have a empire around the world, want to control the whole world. So when this big bad America does things, it decides what's legal and what's illegal. So be careful when you point your finger at Donald Trump saying he's a felon. Of course he's a felon because of the things that he have done in office. But you say he's a felon. Look at every president, every single president. Americans are under a spell. And the whole world knows it. Thank you for watching. I am your host,